There is a scene in Season 6, Episode 24, of Adventure Time where Finn the human sits on the edge of a grassy hill and stares at nothing. He has just lost his father for the second time. He has just lost his arm for the second time. He has just been told, in so many words, that the person who was supposed to love him the most in the world simply does not. The camera holds on his face for nearly 4 seconds without dialogue, without music, without movement. And in those 4 seconds, a cartoon about a boy and his magical dog asks you a question that most adult dramas never bother with. What do you do when the thing you were searching for turns out to be the thing that breaks you? That single moment contains the entire thesis of Adventure Time. Not the magic, not the kingdoms, not the apocalypse or the candy people or the ice crowns. The thesis is simpler and heavier than any of those things. It is this: life will not stop hurting you, and you are going to be okay anyway. If you have been looking for something to listen to while you rest tonight, this is going to be a long and quiet one. We are going to walk through the lore of this show not to catalog it, but to sit with the lessons it was trying to teach. Some of them are about growing up, some of them are about love. A few of them are about the kind of grief that does not have a clean ending. And almost all of them landed harder than they had any right to, hidden inside a show that most people dismissed as a cartoon for children. Subscribing to Pine Hat genuinely helps us keep making these kinds of videos, and it is completely free. Now, let us begin where every life lesson begins, which is with the slow and painful realization that you are not who you thought you were. Finn the human arrives in the first episode of Adventure Time as a 13-year-old boy who believes the world is simple. There are good guys and bad guys. Good guys punch bad guys. Problems are solved by heroism, which is to say, by showing up and swinging a sword. This is not a critique of the character. This is exactly what a 13-year-old hero should believe. The show knows this. The show built its entire first season around letting you believe it too, because the first lesson Adventure Time teaches is that you have to believe in something simple before you can understand why the world is not. In the early episodes, Finn's moral compass points in one direction and never wavers. He saves princesses because princesses need saving. He fights monsters because monsters are evil. He helps his friends because helping is what heroes do. The animation style reinforces this. Bright colors, elastic motion, villains who announce themselves. There is a comfort in this version of the show that is easy to overlook in retrospect, because it does not last. But it is important to acknowledge what the show gave you before you can appreciate what it took away. The pilot episode, which Pendleton Ward originally produced as a short for Nickelodeon's Random Cartoons in 2007, before Cartoon Network picked up the series, establishes this tonal contract immediately. Finn and Jake exist in a world of pure moral clarity. The Ice King kidnaps princesses. Finn rescues them. Jake stretches into useful shapes. Everyone laughs. The animation is rough, the jokes are absurdist, and the emotional register is exactly what you would expect from a cartoon aimed at 7-year-olds. There is no hint in those first moments that this show is building toward anything deeper, and that is entirely intentional. Adventure Time needed you to feel safe before it could teach you that safety is temporary. Season 1 unfolds as a series of self-contained adventures that almost never require you to remember what happened in the previous episode. Slumber Party Panic, which aired on April 5th, 2010 as the show's official premiere, is 12 minutes of candy zombies and silly voices and Princess Bubblegum building a serum in her lab. Trouble in Lumpy Space sends Finn and Jake into a floating dimension of sarcastic purple clouds. Prisoners of Love has the Ice King kidnapping princesses in a plot so straightforward it could be summarized in a single sentence. These are not complex stories. They are not trying to be. They are establishing a world, a tone, and a set of relationships that the show will spend the next 9 years slowly, methodically deconstructing. The first real crack in Finn's worldview arrives not as a dramatic event, but as a quiet failure. In Ricardio the Heart Guy, Season 1, Episode 7, Finn encounters a villain who does not look like a villain. Ricardio, who is literally the Ice King's sentient heart, presents himself as charming, intelligent, and attractive. Everything Finn is not. Finn's instinct is to distrust him, but nobody else agrees. Princess Bubblegum finds Ricardio interesting. Jake thinks Finn is being jealous. The episode forces Finn for the first time to confront the possibility that his gut feelings about good and evil might be wrong, or that they might be right in a way that nobody around him is equipped to recognize. He turns out to be correct about Ricardio, but the victory is hollow. He was right for the wrong reasons. He distrusted Ricardio not because of evidence, but because of jealousy. And the fact that jealousy happened to point in the same direction as truth does not make it a reliable compass. This is a small moment in a show full of larger ones, but it plants a seed that will bloom across 10 seasons. The world is not divided into good and evil. Sometimes the right instinct comes from the wrong place. Sometimes the person you trust most is the person who is most dangerous. And sometimes your own motivations are so tangled that you cannot tell whether you are acting out of virtue or insecurity. Finn does not have the vocabulary for any of this at 13. He will spend the next 4 years acquiring it. The progression accelerates in Season 2. Mortal Folly and Mortal Recoil, the 2-part season finale, introduce the Lich, a being of pure extinction who exists not to conquer or enslave, but simply to end all life. The Lich is the first villain Finn encounters who cannot be defeated by punching. The Lich cannot be reasoned with. The Lich cannot be redeemed. The Lich is entropy given a face. And Finn's response to him, charging in with a sweater enchanted by Princess Bubblegum, shouting battle cries, is both heroic and completely insufficient. Finn does not defeat the Lich in this episode. Princess Bubblegum does, through preparation and sacrifice, and the cost is her temporary death and reconstruction. The lesson is delivered without emphasis. Courage is necessary, but not sufficient. The universe contains problems that cannot be solved by a brave kid with a sword, and pretending otherwise does not make you a hero. It makes you a casualty. Finn's romantic education begins in Incendium, Season 3, Episode 26, and continues through what might be the most emotionally honest depiction of young love in the history of animated television. Jake, trying to help Finn get over Princess Bubblegum's rejection, ventures into the Fire Kingdom and accidentally commits Finn to a relationship with Flame Princess. On the surface, this is a comedy episode. Jake does a silly voice, things catch fire. But underneath the gag, something subtle has shifted. For the first time, Finn's emotional life is not something he can control with bravery. He cannot punch his way through a broken heart. He cannot quest his way into being loved back. And the show, which until this point had rewarded him for every act of courage, offers him nothing for this one. No resolution, no lesson learned. Just a boy sitting in his treehouse, confused, while the world continues without waiting for him to catch up. The relationship with Flame Princess, which begins in earnest in Season 4, is where Adventure Time first demonstrates its commitment to emotional consequences that do not reset. In Burning Low, Season 4, Episode 16, Princess Bubblegum warns Finn that his relationship with Flame Princess could be physically dangerous, that her elemental instability could literally destroy the world if her emotions become too intense. Finn hears this warning and interprets it the way a young person interprets any warning about love, as something to be overcome, as an obstacle between him and the thing he wants. He is not entirely wrong to see it this way, because the show reveals that Bubblegum's motivations are not purely altruistic, that there is a possessiveness in her concern that complicates the moral picture. But Finn is not entirely right either, because the danger is real, and his refusal to take it seriously is not courage. It is the kind of blindness that only young love can produce. By Season 5, the cracks have widened into something more recognizable. Frost and Fire, Season 5, Episode 30, is the episode where Finn, driven by a recurring dream he does not fully understand, manipulates Flame Princess and Ice King into fighting each other. The dream is explicitly intimate in a way the show handles with remarkable subtlety, depicting Finn's unconscious desires through the metaphor of fire and ice colliding. Finn does not understand what the dream means. He only knows it makes him feel something he wants to feel again. And so he engineers a situation that will reproduce it regardless of the cost to the people involved. This is the moment where the show stops protecting Finn. He is not the victim of a curse. He is not being manipulated by a villain. He is a 14-year-old boy who has done something selfish and destructive because he was confused about his own desire. Flame Princess discovers what he did. She breaks up with him, and the show, in one of its most quietly devastating moments, does not frame this as a temporary setback on the way to reconciliation. It frames it as a consequence. Finn did something wrong, and the person he hurt has every right to walk away. No villain caused this, no curse, no spell, just a boy who is not yet equipped to handle the weight of another person's trust. The breakup with Flame Princess is a turning point not just for Finn, but for the show itself. Before this episode, Adventure Time could theoretically return to the status quo after any disruption. After it, the show commits fully to the idea that its characters live inside time, that actions have permanent consequences, and that the narrative will not bend to protect anyone from those consequences. Flame Princess does not come back. She builds a new kingdom. She grows into a leader, and Finn is left not with a villain to blame, but with the understanding, still forming, that the wreckage in his life is his own construction. What makes Finn's arc so effective as a teaching tool is not the suffering itself, but the show's refusal to moralize about it. At no point does a character sit Finn down and explain what he did wrong. At no point does the narrative insert a moment of reflection where Finn articulates the lesson he has learned. The show simply shows you what happened, shows you the consequence, and then moves forward. If you are 14, you watch Finn and feel the sting of recognition, without having the vocabulary to explain it. If you are 30, you watch Finn and remember being 14, and you feel something else, a kind of tender retrospective compassion for the version of yourself that had to learn these things the hard way. Either way, the show has done its work. It has taught you something about the relationship between desire and responsibility without ever saying the word responsibility aloud. Escape from the Citadel, Season 6, Episode 2, is the episode that completes the first phase of Finn's education. Finn's father, Martin Mertens, has been a mystery for the entire series, a figure whose absence shaped Finn's identity as profoundly as any presence could have. When Finn finally finds Martin in the Citadel, a cosmic prison for the universe's most dangerous criminals, the reunion is not what he expected. Martin is not a hero who was separated from his son by tragic circumstances. He is not a villain who abandoned his child out of malice. He is something worse than either of those things. He is a man who simply does not care. Martin sees Finn, recognizes him, and decides in real time that his own survival matters more than his son. He uses the chaos of the Lich's attack on the Citadel to flee, and when Finn grabs his leg, refusing to let go, Martin pulls free with enough force to tear Finn's arm from his body. The arm does not grow back, not in the next scene, not in the next episode. Finn spends multiple episodes with a missing limb, a visible marker of the damage his father's indifference inflicted. The show does not give Finn a dramatic monologue about abandonment. It does not give him a revenge arc. It gives him something much harder to watch: quiet, confused grief. Finn does not know what to do with a father who did not want him. There is no protocol for this, there is no sword to swing. There is only the fact of it, sitting inside him like a stone, reshaping everything it touches. This is the lesson that separates Adventure Time from almost every other animated series of its era. Consequences in this show are not reversible. When Flame Princess leaves, she stays gone. When Finn's arm is torn off, it stays gone. When Princess Bubblegum makes a morally questionable decision, the show does not allow her a redemptive speech that wipes the slate clean. Things that happen in Adventure Time have happened, and the characters must continue living in a world shaped by those happenings. This is, quietly, one of the most radical things a children's show has ever done. It treated its audience as people who could handle the idea that not everything gets fixed. Finn's response to his father's betrayal unfolds across the entirety of Season 6, which is the darkest and most internally focused season of the series. In the Tower, Season 6, Episode 4, Finn grows a telekinetic phantom arm driven by rage and uses it to build a tower to space, planning to find his father and tear off his arm in return. The plan is absurd. The emotion is not. Finn is trying to convert grief into action, which is the only strategy he has ever been taught, and the show lets him pursue it to its logical conclusion, which is that revenge does not restore what was lost. It just makes you tired. When the tower collapses and Finn falls back to Earth, Jake catches him, and Finn cries. Not heroic tears. The quiet, exhausted tears of a person who has run out of strategies and has nothing left except the feeling itself. Breezy, Season 6, Episode 6, which aired on June 5, 2014, continues this descent into emotional territory that animated television had never attempted. Finn, still processing the loss of his arm and the loss of his father and the loss of his sense of purpose, spends the episode pursuing meaningless romantic encounters with various princesses, seeking physical comfort as a substitute for emotional processing. The episode does not condemn him for this, it does not endorse it, it simply observes it with the gentle, non-judgmental attention that Adventure Time gives to all of Finn's failures. A bee named Breezy, who has fallen in love with the flower growing from Finn's stump, follows him through the episode, watching his self-destructive spiral with growing alarm. The episode ends with Finn's arm regrowing through what can only be described as a moment of emotional catharsis, the flower blooming into a new limb through a burst of light and feeling. But the metaphor is not about restoration. It is about the idea that healing does not come from the things you chase. It comes from the moment you stop chasing and allow yourself to feel what you have been avoiding. The Hall of Egress, Season 6, Episode 28 takes Finn's interior education even further. In this episode, Finn enters a dungeon and discovers that every time he opens his eyes, he is returned to the beginning. The only way to progress is to keep his eyes closed, to move forward blindly, trusting his other senses and his memory of the space around him. The metaphor is not subtle, but it does not need to be. Sometimes the way forward requires you to stop looking for the way forward. Sometimes the thing preventing you from escaping the loop you are stuck in is your insistence on seeing the exit before you reach it. Finn spends what feels like years inside the Hall of Egress, aging, growing a long beard, losing track of time and purpose. When he finally closes his eyes and walks forward without knowing where he is going, he emerges into sunlight, and the years fall away, and he is himself again. The episode is 12 minutes long. It contains entire philosophies about surrender and trust and the difference between seeing and understanding. And it delivers them inside a cartoon about a kid in a dungeon. The concept of identity in Adventure Time deserves its own long examination, because the show approaches it with a sophistication that only becomes visible across many episodes viewed in sequence. Finn begins the series believing he is the last human in the land of Ooo. This is presented as a fact in the early seasons, and Finn wears it the way a teenager wears any label that makes them feel special, proudly and without questioning what it actually means. Being the last human gives Finn a purpose. It makes his heroism feel necessary. It makes his existence feel important in a way that goes beyond what he does and into what he is. The show dismantles this across hundreds of episodes, so slowly that you almost do not notice it happening. First, in Susan Strom Season 2, Episode 18, Finn meets a woman who might be human. She is large, strong, and wears a hat that conceals her ears. Finn's reaction is not excitement, but confusion. If there are other humans, what does that make him? Not less of a hero exactly, but less of a singularity. His uniqueness, which was also his loneliness, begins to erode. The episode does not resolve the question of Susan's humanity. It leaves it open for 5 seasons, during which time the uncertainty itself becomes part of Finn's identity. He is the last human, except maybe he is not. He is unique, except maybe he is not. He is special, except maybe the thing that made him special was never about species at all. Then, in Betty, Season 5, Episode 48, Simon Petrikov's fiancée arrives from the past, and she is unambiguously human. Betty Groff, a woman who has been dead for 1,000 years in every timeline Finn knew about, steps through a portal and into the present, and the last human narrative takes another hit. Then, in Minerva, the 4th episode of The Islands, a miniseries that aired on January 30th, 2017, Finn discovers his mother. Not a grave, not a memory. His actual, living mother, preserved as a digital consciousness on an island colony where thousands of humans live in relative safety. They are not dead. They were never dead. They simply left, and no one told him. Finn, who has spent his entire life carrying the identity of the last human as both a burden and a badge, stands in front of a civilization of humans and has to reckon with the fact that the thing that made him different was a misunderstanding. The lesson here is one that the show handles with extraordinary grace, and it is the kind of lesson that you might need to hear more than once before it lands. Finn's specialness was never about being the last human. It was about being Finn. The thing that made him matter was not his species, but his choices, his willingness to show up, his refusal to stop caring even when caring cost him everything. When the show removes the external marker of identity that he had been relying on, it forces both Finn and the audience to confront a question that every person faces at some point in their life. Who are you when the thing that made you different turns out to be a misunderstanding? Who are you when the label falls off? Who are you when the story you told yourself about yourself turns out to be a story someone else wrote without checking the facts? Adventure Time's answer is characteristically gentle. You are whoever you decide to be next, not whoever you were told you were, not whoever you needed to be for someone else, just the person who stands up after the label falls off and keeps walking. Finn returns from the islands without his identity crisis resolved in any neat way. He is not devastated. He is not thrilled. He is a person who has received new information about himself and is still in the process of absorbing it. And the show lets that be enough. It does not push him toward a dramatic moment of self-redefinition. It does not have him deliver a speech about what it means to be human. It simply lets him sit with the new knowledge and continue being Finn, which the show quietly argues was always the point. This approach to identity extends to nearly every major character in the series, and each version of it teaches something slightly different about the nature of selfhood. BMO, the sentient video game console who lives with Finn and Jake in the treehouse, is perhaps the purest expression of the show's philosophy. BMO has no fixed gender, BMO has no fixed role, BMO has no fixed personality, or rather, BMO has dozens of personalities that coexist without conflict. BMO is sometimes a camera, sometimes a detective, sometimes a mother, sometimes a cowboy, sometimes a philosopher, sometimes a world leader. In BMO Noir, Season 4, Episode 17, BMO constructs an entire film noir narrative around a missing sock, playing every role simultaneously: detective, victim, femme fatale. Narrator. The episode is 12 minutes of a tiny robot acting out a genre movie alone in a treehouse, and the show treats this not as delusion, but as creativity. BMO is not confused about who they are. BMO simply refuses to be limited by a single answer. There is a lesson in this that you might not catch the first time. The show never asks BMO to choose. It never forces BMO into a box or suggests that fluidity is a phase that will eventually resolve into something more stable. BMO at the end of the series is exactly as undefined as BMO at the beginning. And the show frames this not as arrested development, but as a kind of freedom that the other characters quietly envy. Jake understands it because Jake has something of this quality himself. Finn respects it because Finn has learned enough by the later seasons to recognize that there are kinds of strength he does not possess. And the audience, whether they realize it or not, is being taught that identity does not require permanence to be real. You can be a different version of yourself every day and still be entirely yourself. The versions do not cancel each other out. They accumulate, they layer, they become the complex, contradictory, impossible to summarize thing that a human being actually is. Marceline the Vampire Queen teaches yet another version of this lesson, and hers is the one that cuts deepest because it is the one most connected to time. Marceline has been alive for over 1,000 years. She has been a child, a survivor, a punk rocker, a loner, a lover, a queen, and an exile. She has reinvented herself so many times that the question of who she really is has become not just unanswerable, but irrelevant. In Marceline's Closet, Season 3, Episode 21, Finn and Jake accidentally see Marceline alone in her house, singing to herself, unguarded and vulnerable in a way she never allows in public. The scene lasts less than a minute, but it reveals something the show has been hinting at for 3 seasons. Marceline's toughness is a performance, not a lie, exactly. She is genuinely tough, but the toughness is also a costume she puts on over the person underneath. And the person underneath is someone who has been hurt so many times that vulnerability feels like an invitation for more pain. Stakes, the miniseries that aired on November 16, 2015, explores this most explicitly. Marceline asks Princess Bubblegum to remove her vampirism, choosing mortality over immortality, choosing an ending over eternity. The decision is framed not as a loss of power, but as a reclamation of self. Marceline does not want to live forever. She does not want to be defined by the thing that was done to her 1,000 years ago. She wants to be a person with a beginning and a middle and an end, like everyone else. The vampires she killed in the past return as she loses her powers, and she has to fight them again, and each one represents a different aspect of the identity she is trying to shed. The Fool represents irresponsibility. The Empress represents manipulation. The Hierophant represents false authority. The Moon represents the part of her that is drawn to darkness, not because she is evil, but because darkness is familiar, and familiar feels safe even when it is killing you. The lesson Marceline teaches across her 1,000-year arc is this: you are not your worst experience. The thing that happened to you, the thing that changed you, the thing that turned you into something you did not choose to be, does not have the final word on who you are. You can fight it, you can shed it, you can choose to be someone new. It will not be easy. The old identities will come back like vampires in the night, and you will have to fight them again and again. But the fight itself is the act of self-creation, and the act of self-creation is the most human thing there is, whether you are technically human or a 1,000-year-old half-demon vampire who plays bass and lives in a cave. Jake the dog's contribution to Adventure Time's catalog of life lessons is different from Finn's, and in some ways more subtle, because Jake already knows most of the things that Finn spends 10 seasons discovering. Jake knows that the world is complicated. He knows that love is messy. He knows that sometimes the heroic thing to do is nothing at all. But Jake's knowledge is not intellectual. It is temperamental. He is calm because that is his nature, not because he has thought his way to calmness. And the show uses this distinction to teach something important about the difference between wisdom and understanding. Jake is wise. He gives good advice most of the time. He supports Finn without smothering him. He knows when to fight and when to let things go. He can sense when Finn is spiraling before Finn himself can, and he responds with a mixture of warmth and gentle redirection that is honestly better parenting than most actual parents provide. But Jake does not always understand why he knows these things, which means he cannot always explain them. In Dad's Dungeon, Season 3, Episode 25, Jake and Finn explore a dungeon built by their father Joshua, and Jake's response to the challenges is instinctive, where Finn's is analytical. Jake does not need to understand the dungeon to navigate it. He feels his way through, relying on some combination of intuition and experience that he could not articulate if you asked him to. This is a gift, but it is also a limitation. Jake cannot teach what he knows because he does not know how he knows it. He can only demonstrate it and hope that the people around him are paying attention. The show explores the limits of Jake's approach most powerfully in Jake the Brick, Season 6, Episode 20, which aired on November 6, 2014. In this episode, Jake transforms himself into a brick in the wall of a collapsing shed and narrates the lives of the animals around him like a nature documentary. Nothing happens, no adventure, no villain, no quest, no lesson announced. Jake simply watches and describes, and the entire land of Ooh tunes in to listen. The episode is a meditation on observation as a form of participation, on the idea that sometimes the most meaningful thing you can do is pay attention to what is already happening around you. Jake does not change anything in this episode. He does not save anyone. He does not learn anything he did not already know. He sits inside a wall and bears witness to the small, ordinary struggles of rabbits and birds. And the show suggests that this too is heroism. Not the sword-swinging kind, not the kind that makes you feel important. The kind that says, I see you, I notice that you are here. I will sit with you in this moment. That is enough. This is a lesson that works differently depending on when you encounter it. If you are young, it teaches patience. If you are older, it teaches something closer to presence, which is the ability to exist inside a moment without needing to transform it into something more exciting or meaningful than it already is. Jake's superpower in Adventure Time is not his stretching ability, although that gets most of the screen time. His superpower is his willingness to be wherever he is without wishing he were somewhere else. He does not need the adventure to feel alive. He does not need the crisis to feel useful. He can sit in a wall and watch a rabbit build a burrow and find it genuinely interesting. And the show never quite says this aloud, but it demonstrates it so consistently that by the end of the series, you've absorbed it whether you meant to or not. There is a corollary to Jake's contentment that the show does not shy away from, and it is this. Sometimes the calm person is calm because they are avoiding something. Jake's relationship with his children, the 5 puppies born in Jake the Dad Season 5, Episode 6, reveals a version of Jake that is less wise and more conflicted than the friend Finn relies on. Jake loves his children, but he is also terrified by them. Fatherhood demands a kind of consistency that Jake has never had to provide. It demands showing up not when you feel like it, but every day, regardless of whether you are in the mood for an adventure or a brick wall. Jake does not always meet this demand. His children grow up fast, far faster than normal, and by the time Jake has adjusted to the idea of being a father, most of them have moved on. Kim Kil-won, the most independent of Jake's pups, becomes a successful businessman who is quietly resentful of his father's casual approach to responsibility. The show does not take sides in this conflict. It simply shows you a father who loved his children in the way he knew how, which was not always the way they needed. The lesson here is uncomfortable, and the show does not soften it. Love is not enough. Caring about someone is not the same as being there for them. Jake cares about his children deeply. He would fight any monster for them. He would die for them without hesitation, but he would also forget to pick them up from school. He would also disappear on an adventure when they needed stability. He would also respond to their serious problems with a joke and a stretch, because that is how Jake processes the world. And what works for Jake does not always work for the people who depend on him. This is a lesson about the difference between love and presence, and it is one that Adventure Time delivers with enough empathy for both sides that you can hold it without feeling attacked, regardless of which side you recognize yourself in. The relationship between Marceline the Vampire Queen and Simon Petrikov is where Adventure Time reaches its deepest emotional register, and it is also where the show delivers its most difficult lessons about love, loss, and the limits of what caring about someone can actually accomplish. To understand why this storyline hits as hard as it does, you have to understand the timeline. 1,000 years before the events of the show, Simon Petrikov was an antiquarian, a scholar, a gentle and slightly awkward man engaged to a woman named Betty Groff. He found an ancient crown at a dockside in Scandinavia. He put it on as a joke, and the crown, which is alive in a way the show takes 8 seasons to fully explain, began to erase him, not all at once. Slowly, memory by memory, personality trait by personality trait, thought by thought, until the man who once cataloged artifacts for a living could no longer remember his own name. But before that process was complete, before Simon became the Ice King entirely, there was a gap, a window of years during which Simon was still partly himself, losing more each day but still capable of love, of fear, of recognizing what was happening to him. This is the most painful part of the story, and the show knows it. Simon in this transitional period is a man watching himself disappear. He keeps a video diary which Marceline discovers 1,000 years later, And in those recordings, his voice shifts from lucid to confused to desperate across entries that might span weeks or months or years. He talks about Marceline, he talks about Betty, he talks about the crown and what it is doing to him. And then gradually, he stops talking about anything coherent at all, and the recordings become the ramblings of a man who is no longer there, speaking in a voice that is recognizably Simon's, but carrying words that are not his own. During that window of partial lucidity, Simon found Marceline. She was a little girl, half demon, alone and terrified, wandering the wreckage of a world that had just ended in nuclear fire. The Mushroom War had destroyed everything. Cities were rubble. Radiation had begun to mutate the surviving lifeforms into the creatures that would eventually populate Ooo. And in the middle of that devastation, a man who was losing his mind found a child who had lost everything else, and they took care of each other. I Remember You, Season 4, Episode 25, which aired on October 15, 2012, is the episode where this story first comes into full focus. The Ice King, oblivious to his own history, shows up at Marceline's house with a pile of old notes and asks for her help writing a song. Marceline looks at the notes and realizes they are Simon's. They are fragments of letters he wrote to her before he forgot who she was. Love notes from a father figure to a child he knew he was about to lose. Not to death, but to something worse, to the erasure of the person who loved her while the body continued walking around. Marceline tries to tell the Ice King who he used to be. He does not understand. He cannot understand. The crown has taken that capacity from him. And Marceline, who is over 1,000 years old and has survived the apocalypse and fought vampires and ruled kingdoms, sits in her house and cries because the person who saved her life is standing in front of her and does not know her name. This episode changed the trajectory of the entire series. Before I Remember You, the Ice King was a comic antagonist, a lonely weirdo who kidnapped princesses and talked to penguins. After it, he was a tragedy so deep that every previous scene with him retroactively became heartbreaking. Every time he had been played for laughs, every time Finn punched him, every time he was mocked or dismissed, the audience had been watching a man with dementia be treated as a nuisance. The show made you complicit in this, and then it made you care, and in the space between those two things, it taught you something about empathy that no lecture could deliver. You do not know what someone is carrying. You never know. And the assumptions you make about the people around you, especially the ones who seem broken or foolish or beyond help, are almost certainly wrong. Simon and Marcy, Season 5, Episode 14, pushes this even further. The episode is a flashback to Simon and young Marceline surviving in the ruins of the post-apocalyptic world. Marceline is sick. She needs soup. And Simon, whose mind is deteriorating with every passing day, puts on the crown to fight the mutated creatures that stand between them and a can of chicken soup in a ruined convenience store. Every use of the crown makes him worse. He knows this. He puts it on anyway because the child he is responsible for needs to eat, and there is nothing he will not sacrifice for her, including the last pieces of himself. The lesson here is not simple, and the show does not pretend it is. What Simon and Marceline's story teaches is that love does not protect you from loss. Loving someone completely, sacrificing everything for them, giving them every piece of yourself you have left, none of that guarantees a happy ending. None of that guarantees they will be okay. None of that guarantees you will be okay. Simon loved Marceline with everything he had, and he still lost her. Not because the love was insufficient, but because the world does not arrange itself around love. The crown did not care about their relationship. The apocalypse did not care about their bond. Time did not care about their history. The universe in Adventure Time, like the universe you and I live in, is not a narrative that rewards good people with good outcomes. It simply continues, indifferent and vast, and the people inside it have to find their own meaning in whatever happens. But the show does not stop at that dark observation. If it did, it would be a different show and a lesser one. What Adventure Time adds, what makes this storyline bearable and ultimately beautiful, is the idea that love can survive the loss of the person who carries it. Marceline does not forget Simon. For 1,000 years, she carries him inside her like a wound that will not close and a warmth that will not fade. The Ice King does not forget that he once loved someone even though he cannot remember who or why. For 1,000 years, he wanders the land of Ooo searching for princesses, repeating a pattern whose origin he has lost, driven by an echo of devotion so deep that even total cognitive destruction cannot erase it. He does not know what he is looking for. He only knows that something is missing. He only knows that there is a shape in his chest where a person used to be. And in the Ice King's confusion, in his sad and endless searching, the show finds something unexpectedly profound. The idea that love, at its most essential, is not a memory. It is not a name, it is not a face you can picture or a voice you can recall. Love is a direction. Even when you have lost everything else, even when the disease has taken your name and your history and your ability to recognize the people who matter most, love is the thing that keeps you moving, even if you can no longer remember toward what. The Ice King is the saddest character in Adventure Time, but he is also, in this specific way, the most hopeful. Because if love can survive what happened to Simon Petrikov, then love can survive anything. That is not a guarantee of a happy ending, but it is a guarantee that the thing that matters most about you, the capacity to care about another person, is more durable than the vessel that carries it. Princess Bubblegum's arc in Adventure Time teaches a different set of lessons entirely, and they are the kind that become more relevant the older you get. Bonnie Belle Bubblegum is, in the early seasons, presented as a benevolent genius, a scientist queen who rules the Candy Kingdom with intelligence, warmth, and an almost maternal protectiveness toward her subjects. She is the person everyone goes to for answers. She is the person Finn idolizes and, for a while, loves. She is competent, composed, and seemingly in control of everything around her. The early show treats her as an authority figure beyond reproach, and so does the audience. It takes several seasons for Adventure Time to reveal what it was actually building with this character, which is a study in the cost of responsibility and the moral compromises that power demands of anyone who holds it long enough. The cracks in Bubblegum's moral foundation begin appearing in Season 5 and widen steadily through Season 8. In the cooler, Season 6, Episode 22, it is revealed that Princess Bubblegum has been conducting surveillance on the other kingdoms of Ooo, monitoring their activities without their knowledge or consent. She has spies. She has listening devices. She has a surveillance network so thorough that she knows what is happening inside the Fire Kingdom's borders better than Flame Princess does. When Flame Princess discovers this, she is furious. Bubblegum's response is revealing she does not apologize. She does not pretend she did not know what she was doing. She explains calmly and without defensiveness that she has to protect her people, and that protection requires information, and that information requires watching. This is not a villain's logic, it is a leader's logic, and the show understands the difference with a precision that most adult political dramas fail to achieve. Bubblegum is not wrong that the Candy Kingdom faces threats. The Lich nearly destroyed it. The Ice King routinely threatens it. The Fire Kingdom's elemental instability could end it. She is not wrong that foreknowledge saves lives. She is simply operating inside a moral framework that allows her to violate the sovereignty of others in service of her own people's safety, and the show asks you to sit with the discomfort of that without offering a clear verdict. Is she right? Is she wrong? The show does not say. It just shows you the surveillance and the reaction and the justification and lets you carry the question forward into your own life, where the answer depends on who you are and what you have had to protect. This becomes a pattern with Bubblegum across the later seasons. In The Thin Yellow Line, Season 7, Episode 24, she confronts the reality that her banana guards, the soldiers she created to protect the Candy Kingdom, are sentient beings with their own thoughts, feelings, and desires, beings she has been treating as expendable tools. One of them, Banana Guard 16, has been secretly painting abstract art in the margins of his patrol reports. He is not malfunctioning. He is creating. He has an inner life that Bubblegum never designed and never intended, and when she discovers it, her reaction is not wonder, but alarm. An inner life means free will. Free will means unpredictability. Unpredictability means danger. The show does not resolve this tension. It simply presents it and lets you sit with it, the same way it lets you sit with every other uncomfortable truth it delivers. In Nemesis, Season 6, Episode 9, Bubblegum's pragmatism reaches its most troubling expression when it is revealed that she has created failsafes capable of destroying threats she has not yet identified. She has built weapons not for current dangers, but for hypothetical ones. And the line between preparedness and paranoia is thinner than she would like to admit. The episode introduces Peacemaster, a character who believes Bubblegum is dangerous, and the show does not entirely disagree with him. She is, not because she is evil, but because she is competent and frightened and in possession of power that exceeds any individual's ability to wield responsibly. The lesson Bubblegum teaches is one that the show never states directly, but illustrates with uncomfortable precision. Across dozens of episodes, the people who take care of everyone else are the people most likely to lose themselves in the process. Bubblegum does not have the luxury of Finn's moral simplicity. She cannot simply be good. She has to be effective. And effectiveness in a world full of actual dangers requires decisions that goodness would prohibit. She spies on her allies because the last time she was not prepared, people died. She creates soldiers she can control because the last time she relied on free will, someone betrayed her. She builds weapons for hypothetical threats because the last time she assumed peace would last, it did not. Each compromise is rational, each compromise is justified, and each compromise takes her further from the person she might have been if she had not been carrying an entire kingdom on her back since before Finn was born. If you have ever been the responsible one in a family, in a workplace, in a friendship, in a relationship, Bubblegum's arc will feel familiar in a way that is difficult to articulate but impossible to miss. The show understands that taking care of people is not romantic. It is not noble in the way stories usually portray it. It is exhausting and thankless, and it changes you in ways you do not notice until someone points them out. And by then, you have been the dependable one for so long that you cannot remember what you were like before. Bubblegum at the end of the series is harder than Bubblegum at the beginning, and the show does not pretend otherwise. But it also shows you the moments where that hardness cracks, where the person underneath the queen surfaces for just long enough to remind you that she is still in there, still wanting the thing she has convinced herself she cannot have. In Varmints, Season 7, Episode 2, Bubblegum, temporarily deposed from her throne by the King of Oo, goes on an adventure with Marceline through the underground tunnels beneath the Candy Kingdom. Freed from the weight of the crown, freed from the responsibility that had been compressing her into something harder and smaller than she started, Bubblegum allows herself to be vulnerable for the first time in what feels like seasons. She laughs. She makes mistakes. She admits that she is scared, not of the varmints they are hunting, but of the possibility that everything she built was not worth what she lost to build it. And you realize, watching it, that the Candy Kingdom did not just cost Bubblegum her time. It cost her the ability to be a person instead of a ruler. It cost her Marceline, whom she loved and could not prioritize. It cost her friendships she did not maintain because maintenance requires time she did not have. It cost her the version of herself that could sit in a cave and laugh at a stupid joke, without calculating whether the laughter served a strategic purpose. The lesson is not that leadership is bad. The lesson is not that caring about people is a mistake. The lesson is that it costs more than anyone tells you it will. And you should know that before you volunteer. And if you have already volunteered, if you are already deep in the work of holding everyone else together, then the lesson is this: you are still in there. The person you were before the responsibility arrived is not dead. They are compressed, and given even a small amount of space, a single night in a tunnel with someone who knew you before, they will surface, blinking and uncertain, and they will remind you why the work was worth it in the first place. There is a thread in Adventure Time that deals with the concept of grief more honestly than most shows designed for adults, and it runs through the entire series from the first frame to the last. The show's relationship with grief begins not with a character, but with its setting. Oo is a post-apocalyptic world. The Mushroom War, a nuclear conflict that destroyed human civilization roughly 1,000 years before the show's timeline, is present in every shot even when it is not mentioned. The candy streets and cotton candy forests grow from irradiated soil. The dungeons are the basements of collapsed office buildings. The ocean that surrounds the continent has receded, leaving a massive crater where a chunk of the earth was blasted away, visible in the opening credits of every single episode as a bite-shaped hole in the planet. The mutations that created the show's fantastical creatures, talking dogs, sentient food, living fire, shape-shifting aliens, are the result of a mutagenic bomb that rewrote the biology of everything it touched. The entire world of Adventure Time is built on loss. And the show never forgets this, even when it is at its silliest. This is important because it means that grief in the show is not a single event that arrives in a special episode and gets processed by the end credits. Grief in Adventure Time is environmental. It is the background radiation of the world itself. Every bright color in the show is growing from scorched earth. Every silly character is a mutation produced by extinction-level violence. Every happy ending takes place on a planet that already ended once. The show never lets you forget this for long, but it also never dwells on it in a way that overrides the comedy or the adventure. It simply holds both truths at the same time. The world ended, and the world continued. And both of those things are true, and the space between them is where life happens. Finn grieves throughout the series, but the show distributes his grief so carefully that no single episode bears the full weight of it. He grieves the father he never had in the early seasons, building an idealized image of a hero parent who was taken from him by circumstances beyond anyone's control. Then he grieves the father he found and lost in Season 6, when Martin Mertens turns out to be a man whose selfishness is not a mask for deeper feeling, but the whole of what he is. Then he grieves the version of himself that believed a father's love would fix the hole inside him, which is perhaps the hardest grief of all, because it requires letting go not of a person but of a fantasy. And fantasies, unlike people, do not leave evidence of their departure. One day you simply notice they are gone, and the space they occupied has filled with something quieter and heavier and more permanent. Marceline grieves across a timescale that the show uses to devastating effect. She grieves Simon, who became the Ice King. She grieves her mother, who died in the Mushroom War and appears only in fragments and flashbacks. She grieves the centuries she spent alone, watching civilizations rise and fall, making friends and losing them to the thing she could not lose: time. In Evicted, Season 1, Episode 12, Marceline appears to be nothing more than a prankster vampire who kicks Finn and Jake out of their house for fun. But by the time you reach Stakes in Season 7, you understand that her playfulness is a survival strategy. If you have lived for 1,000 years and lost everyone you have ever cared about, humor becomes a kind of armor. You laugh because the alternative is to feel the full accumulated weight of a millennium of goodbyes, and no one, not even an immortal half-demon, can survive that. The Ice King grieves something he cannot name or remember, and this is perhaps the show's most sophisticated treatment of the subject. Dementia, which is what the crown functionally represents, does not erase the emotions associated with memories. It erases the memories and leaves the emotions behind, floating without context, attached to nothing identifiable. The Ice King feels lonely. He feels a longing he cannot explain. He feels that something important is missing from his life, and so he reaches for the closest approximation he can find: princesses, who remind him of something or someone, though he cannot say who or why. His entire life as the Ice King is a grief response to a loss he does not know occurred, and the show plays this for comedy for 3 seasons before revealing the tragedy underneath, which means that by the time you understand what you are watching, you have already been laughing at it for years. Princess Bubblegum grieves the version of herself that existed before she became responsible for everyone else. This is a quiet grief, barely acknowledged even by the character who carries it, but the show makes it visible in small moments scattered across hundreds of episodes. In the way she looks at Marceline when she thinks no one is watching. In the way she pauses, sometimes, in the middle of a scientific explanation, as if she has momentarily lost track of why she is explaining this instead of doing something else, something she used to want and has since filed away under impossible. In Skywitch, Season 5, Episode 29, Bubblegum trades a cherished possession to retrieve Hambo, Marceline's beloved stuffed animal, and the gesture reveals the depth of a feeling she has been suppressing for what might be centuries. She does not say she loves Marceline. She does not need to. The act speaks clearly enough, and the grief it reveals is the grief of a person who chose duty over love and is still paying for it, quietly, every day. BMO grieves in a way that might be the most unexpected and most heartbreaking of all. In BMO, the Distant Future special that aired on June 25th, 2020, the sentient game console is shown living alone in a world that has moved on. Finn and Jake are gone, not temporarily, gone in the way that people eventually are. BMO is carrying their memory through a landscape that does not remember them, and the special treats this not as a tragedy but as a testament to the depth of BMO's love. BMO has not been destroyed by the loss. BMO has been shaped by it. The little game console wanders through fields and forests and ruined cities, and everywhere it goes it tells stories about the friends it once had, keeping them alive in the only way that matters, by refusing to stop talking about them, by refusing to let them become silence. The lesson Adventure Time teaches about grief, distributed across all of these characters and all of these storylines, is the one that most people need to hear and the one that most stories are afraid to offer. Grief does not end. It is not a process with a final stage that you complete and move beyond. It is not something you work through in therapy and emerge from on the other side clean and resolved and ready to move on. Grief in this show is the Ice King still searching for something he cannot name 1,000 years after he lost it. It is Marceline still flinching when she hears a certain chord progression. It is Finn, 10 seasons in, still carrying the weight of a father who chose not to love him. It is Bubblegum, centuries old, still reaching for a hand she told herself she did not need. The show does not promise resolution. It promises something more honest and more useful: continuation. You will grieve, and you will also have breakfast. You will grieve, and you will also fight monsters. You will grieve, and you will also laugh at your friend's terrible joke. You will grieve, and you will also fall asleep to someone's voice telling you about a cartoon. These things are not contradictions. They are what being alive feels like. They are the texture of a life that contains both loss and presence, both absence and connection, both the whole and the things that grow around it. Everything Stays, the lullaby that Marceline sings in Stakes, Season 7, Episode 7, might be the single most concentrated expression of this philosophy in the entire series. The song, written by Rebecca Sugar, who also created Steven Universe and wrote I Remember You and several other songs for the show, is barely a minute long. The melody is simple enough for a child to hum. The delivery, performed by Olivia Olson, who voices Marceline, is quiet and slightly unsteady, like someone singing to themselves in an empty room. And the idea it carries is this: nothing truly disappears. Things change form. They shift. They become something new, sometimes unrecognizable. But the essential substance of what was lost is still present, buried inside whatever it has become. The Mushroom War did not erase humanity. It transformed it into candy people and fire elementals and sentient ice and a boy with a white hat. The crown did not erase Simon. It transformed him into a lonely old man who kidnaps princesses because somewhere underneath the ice, a signal is still pulsing. I loved someone. I cannot remember who. But I loved someone, and that love is still here, and I will keep searching until I find where it belongs. Grief does not erase love. It transforms it into something heavier and sharper, but still recognizably love, still pointed in the same direction, still reaching for the same person, even when that person has changed beyond all recognition. Even when that person is you. This is what Adventure Time means when it says, everything stays. Not that nothing changes, but underneath the change, the substance persists. And if you listen carefully, if you are quiet enough and patient enough and willing to sit with the discomfort of not understanding, you can still hear it. The original note, the first feeling, the thing that was there before everything else, still alive. There is a lesson in Adventure Time about failure that is so woven into the fabric of the show that you might not notice it as a lesson at all. It is this: you are going to fail. You are going to fail repeatedly, specifically, and in ways that are entirely your fault. You are going to hurt people you love. You are going to make decisions that you will regret for years. You are going to ignore warnings, repeat mistakes, and discover the same truths over and over again, because understanding something intellectually and understanding it in your body are two different kinds of knowledge. And the second, one only comes through experience, which is a polite word for suffering. And the measure of who you are is not whether you fail, but what you build in the space between one failure and the next. Finn fails constantly throughout the series. He fails as a boyfriend when he manipulates Flame Princess. He fails as a son when he cannot connect with his father. He fails as a hero when he cannot protect the people who trust him. He makes decisions based on dreams he does not understand. He trusts people who do not deserve it. He ignores Jake's advice. He repeats the same emotional patterns with different people. He is across 10 seasons wrong about nearly everything at least once. And the show never stops loving him for it. Not once. Not even when he is at his worst. Not even when the audience is frustrated with him. The show looks at Finn the way a good parent looks at a child who is making a mistake, with full awareness of the mistake and full confidence that the child is more than the mistake, and full willingness to let the child make it anyway, because that is how learning works. This is something Adventure Time does that very few stories attempt. It separates a character's worth from their track record. Finn, at the end of the series, has a longer list of failures than almost any protagonist in animation history. He has broken hearts, lost limbs, been manipulated, been betrayed, been abandoned, been wrong about nearly everything at some point. And yet the show's final assessment of him is not complicated or conditional. He is a good person, not because he always did the right thing, not because his successes outweigh his failures on some cosmic balance sheet. He is a good person because he kept trying to do the right thing, which is a fundamentally different standard. The first standard, the one most stories use, says that goodness is a record. The second standard, the one Adventure Time proposes, says that goodness is a direction. You are not the sum of your outcomes. You are the sum of your intentions, held honestly, over time. This distinction matters more than it might seem. The record-based view of goodness produces shame. If you are defined by what you have done, then every failure is an indictment. Every mistake is evidence against you, and the accumulation of evidence over a lifetime makes it increasingly difficult to believe you deserve kindness, including from yourself. The direction-based view of goodness produces something else. Not pride exactly, and not self-satisfaction, but a kind of steady self-compassion that allows you to look at the mess of your own history and see not a verdict but a trajectory. You got some things wrong, you got other things less wrong, and the trend, viewed over enough time, is pointing in a direction you can be proud of, even if you cannot be proud of every step. Finn at the end of Adventure Time has not fixed everything. He has not achieved enlightenment. He has not transcended his mistakes or arrived at a final understanding of himself that resolves all contradictions. He is simply a 17-year-old who has been through more than most people experience in a lifetime, and who has emerged from it still willing to show up for the people he cares about. Not always perfectly, not always at the right time or in the right way, but consistently, persistently, with the stubbornness that looks, from the right angle, almost exactly like love. This is, underneath everything else, the most important thing Adventure Time has to say about being a person. You are not defined by your worst moment. You are not defined by your best moment either. You are defined by the space between those moments, by the 1,000 small decisions you make between the dramatic ones, by the way you treat people when nothing is at stake and no one is watching. Finn is not a great hero because he defeated the Lich or saved the Candy Kingdom or survived the loss of his arm. Finn is a great hero because he was kind to BMO when BMO was being weird, because he listened to Jake even when he did not understand what Jake was saying, because he apologized to Flame Princess even though the apology did not win her back, because he went to the islands to find his mother and, when he found her, he did not rage at her for leaving. He did not demand an explanation that would make sense of his childhood. He just sat with her. He just let her be a person who had made a choice he did not understand but could, eventually, accept. The show teaches this lesson across so many episodes and in so many ways that by the end, you have not just heard it, you have lived inside it for 10 seasons and 283 episodes and over 56 hours of accumulated storytelling. And the effect of living inside this idea for that long is that it begins to change the way you think about your own failures. Not immediately, not dramatically, but quietly, the way Adventure Time does everything. You start to notice that the way you talk to yourself about the things you got wrong has shifted. You are a little more patient with yourself, a little more willing to sit with discomfort instead of trying to fix it or flee from it, a little more capable of looking at the mess of your own life and seeing not a sequence of mistakes, but a story that is still being written, one whose ending you cannot predict and whose value does not depend on getting everything right. The friendship between Finn and Jake is the structural foundation of everything in Adventure Time, and because it is always present, always reliable, always there in the background of every crisis and every quiet moment, it is easy to take for granted. But the show does not take it for granted. Across 10 seasons, Adventure Time constructs what might be the most nuanced and emotionally honest depiction of friendship in animation. Not by putting the friendship through dramatic tests, but by showing you what it looks like in the spaces between the tests. The small moments, the conversations that go nowhere, the silences that need no filling, the way Jake can look at Finn and know what he is feeling without asking, and the way Finn can look at Jake and know when to leave him alone. These details accumulate over hundreds of episodes until the friendship feels less like a narrative device and more like a real relationship you have been watching from the inside. Finn and Jake are brothers, technically. Jake was adopted by Finn's human parents, or rather, Finn was adopted by Jake's magical dog parents, Joshua and Margaret, depending on which layer of the story you are in. But the show does not treat their relationship as purely familial. It treats it as a chosen bond, one that both characters recommit to, not through dramatic declarations, but through daily presence. Jake does not stay with Finn because they are brothers. He stays because he wants to. Finn does not rely on Jake because they share a house. He relies on Jake because Jake has earned his trust across a decade of showing up when it matters, and also when it does not. The distinction is important. The show argues across its entire run that the deepest relationships are not the ones held together by obligation or blood or contract. They are the ones held together by the daily, undramatic choice to keep being there. In Dungeon Train, Season 5, Episode 36, Finn discovers a train that generates an endless stream of monsters to fight, each one dropping loot and experience, each victory leading immediately to the next challenge. Finn is addicted almost instantly. The train offers him exactly what he has always wanted: a clear purpose, a steady supply of enemies, and a version of heroism that never requires him to think about anything difficult. Jake watches Finn disappear into this loop, and after trying to pull him out, makes a decision that defines their friendship more clearly than any dramatic sacrifice could. He stays. He does not leave Finn alone in the train. He does not give an ultimatum. He does not make Finn feel guilty for wanting something simple when the world outside is complicated. He just sits there, in the train, waiting. And when Finn finally looks up from the endless loop of combat and sees Jake still there, still patient, still willing to wait however long it takes, that is the moment he chooses to leave. Not because the train stopped being appealing, because Jake was more important than the appeal. This is what friendship looks like in Adventure Time. Not grand gestures, not dramatic sacrifices. Just the willingness to stay present while someone you care about works through something you cannot fix for them. Jake cannot fix Finn's addiction to the train. He cannot fix Finn's heartbreak over Flame Princess. He cannot fix Finn's grief over his father. He cannot fix any of the things that hurt Finn across the series. But he can be there while Finn fixes them himself, and the show argues with quiet conviction that being there is enough. That being there is, in fact, the whole point. The friendship also teaches a lesson about the asymmetry of care, which is something most stories about friendship refuse to acknowledge. Finn needs Jake more than Jake needs Finn. This is not a criticism of either character. It is simply a fact about their emotional architectures. Finn is more fragile, more prone to spiraling, more dependent on external validation. Jake is more stable, more self-contained, more capable of sitting with discomfort without needing to act on it. The friendship works not because they are equal in their neediness, but because they are equal in their commitment. Jake gives more emotional support than he receives. Finn gives more adventure and excitement than he receives. Neither of them keeps score. Neither of them resents the imbalance. They simply offer what they have and accept what is offered. And the result is a relationship that is not equal, but is equitable, which is a different and more sustainable thing. In Come Along With Me, the series finale that aired on September 3rd, 2018, the last shot of Finn and Jake together is not a battle cry or a farewell speech. It is the two of them sitting together, looking at a view. Just that. Two friends at the end of a long story, sitting side by side, sharing a silence that contains 10 years of accumulated meaning. The show does not need to tell you what they are thinking. You already know. You have been watching them think it together for a decade. There is a lesson about resilience in Adventure Time that the show communicates not through any single character, but through the collective behavior of its world. Ooo is a post-apocalyptic civilization that has chosen, against all evidence, to be happy. The Candy people sing songs. The Fire people build kingdoms. The Ice people throw parties. The shape-shifting dogs play instruments. 1,000 years after the end of the world, life has not merely persisted. It has become exuberant, colorful, ridiculous. The citizens of Ooo do not walk around talking about the Mushroom War. Most of them do not know what happened. They have built a new world on top of the ruins of the old one, and they have built it out of joy and weirdness, and an absolute refusal to let the catastrophe that created them define what they become. This is not denial. The show is careful about this distinction. Denial would mean pretending the Mushroom War never happened. Ooo does not pretend. The ruins are visible. The craters are visible. The mutations are visible. The trauma is visible. If you know where to look, in the Ice King's madness, in Marceline's loneliness, in the way Princess Bubblegum stockpiles weapons against threats that have not yet materialized. The people of Ooo are not ignoring their history. They are choosing every day to build something new on top of it. And the show suggests that this choice, this daily recommitment to joy in the face of overwhelming evidence that joy is not guaranteed, is the most resilient thing a person or a civilization can do. There is a philosophical concept that maps onto this beautifully, and it is one that Adventure Time seems to understand intuitively even though it never names it. The philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche described what he called amor fati, the love of fate, which is the idea that a fully realized person does not merely accept the difficulties of their life, but embraces them as necessary components of who they have become. Not because suffering is good, not because pain is purifying, but because you cannot separate the parts of your history that made you from the parts that broke you, because they are the same parts, and to reject one is to reject the other. Ooo embodies this. The Candy people exist because of a nuclear war. Marceline is who she is because of 1,000 years of loss. Finn is who he is because of an absent father and a missing arm and a string of broken hearts that would have destroyed a lesser character. The show does not ask whether these things should have happened. It asks what you build with them now that they have. This is the most practical lesson in the entire show, and it is the one you are most likely to carry with you after the credits roll and the screen goes dark and you are lying in your bed thinking about a cartoon you did not expect to think about this much. You cannot undo what has happened to you. You cannot go back and make different choices. You cannot unbreak the hearts you broke, or unlose the people you lost, or unbecome the person your history made you into. But you can decide what happens next. You can decide that the wreckage is not the end of the story, but the foundation of something new. You can look at the crater where your certainty used to be and think, not this is where everything went wrong, but this is where everything started. Adventure Time's treatment of morality is worth examining on its own, because it is one of the most unusual things about the show, and it is the source of some of its most powerful lessons. Most children's shows operate on a clear moral axis. Good characters do good things. Bad characters do bad things. Occasionally, a good character makes a mistake, learns a lesson, and returns to the good side of the axis by the end of the episode. The moral universe is stable and navigable. You always know where you stand. Adventure Time rejects this framework almost entirely. Good characters in this show do terrible things. Bad characters do beautiful things. And the show refuses to tell you how to feel about any of it. Princess Bubblegum is a hero who conducts surveillance and creates weapons of mass destruction. Marceline is a vampire who sometimes terrorizes people for fun. The Ice King is a kidnapper who is also a victim of a disease he did not choose. The Lich is pure evil who is also, in the form of Sweet Pea, capable of innocence. Lemongrab is a tyrant who is also a person in genuine agony, screaming not because he is cruel, but because he was created wrong and does not know how to exist in a body that causes him constant pain. The show does not excuse any of these characters for the harm they cause. It simply refuses to reduce them to the harm. It insists that a person is more than the worst thing they have done, and that understanding why someone hurts others is not the same as forgiving them for it. This is a lesson that children need and that adults need more. The world is full of people who do things you do not understand. Some of those things will hurt you, some of them will hurt people you love. And the easiest response, the one that requires the least effort and produces the most immediate emotional satisfaction, is to declare those people evil and stop thinking about them. Adventure Time refuses to let you do this. It puts you inside the Ice King's perspective and makes you see that his kidnapping of princesses is not malice but loneliness so profound that it has overwritten his ability to form connections any other way. It puts you inside Lemongrab's perspective and makes you hear his screaming as pain, not anger. And once you hear it that way, you cannot unhear it. The show does not ask you to forgive these characters. It asks you to understand them, which is a much harder and more transformative request. Understanding does not excuse. Adventure Time is emphatic about this. Princess Bubblegum's surveillance is understandable and still wrong. Finn's manipulation of Flame Princess is understandable and still wrong. Martin Mertens' abandonment of his son is understandable, barely if you squint at the edges of his cowardice, and still catastrophically wrong. The show holds both truths simultaneously: the reason and the harm, the explanation and the damage, the why and the what. And it asks you to hold them too, not because it wants you to excuse bad behavior, but because it wants you to approach the world with a more complete set of tools than the binary of good and evil provides. People are complicated, their motivations are tangled, their best intentions produce terrible outcomes, and their worst impulses sometimes lead to unexpected grace. If you want to navigate a world like this, you need something more flexible than a moral compass that only points in two directions. The show's most explicit statement on this topic comes through the character of Sweet Pea, who first appears in Escape from the Citadel, the same episode where Finn loses his arm. The Lich, the embodiment of extinction, is splashed with the Citadel Guardian's healing blood and transformed into a giant baby. Tree Trunks and Mr. Pig adopt him. They name him Sweet Pea. And over the course of several seasons, this former engine of universal annihilation grows into a gentle, confused, slightly anxious child who wants nothing more than to be good. The Lich is still inside him. This is made explicit in multiple episodes. The capacity for absolute destruction is dormant, but present, coiled inside a child who is too kind to activate it. And the show uses this character to ask its most provocative moral question: is a person defined by what they are capable of, or by what they choose? Sweet Pea is capable of ending all life. He chooses to go to school and make friends and worry about whether his lunchbox is cool enough. The show's answer is clear, and it is the answer it has been building toward for the entire run. You are what you choose. Not what you carry, not what was done to you, not what you are capable of. You are the sum of 1,000 small decisions made in the direction of the person you want to be. There is a quieter lesson in Adventure Time that does not get discussed as often, perhaps because it is delivered without any narrative emphasis. And it is this: it is okay to outgrow things. It is okay to look at something that once meant everything to you and feel it mean less. It is okay to change in ways that make your old self unrecognizable to your new self. It is okay to leave. This lesson is embedded in the structure of the show itself, which visibly changes across its 10-season run. The art style matures, the color palette shifts, the stories grow longer and more complex, the humor becomes drier and more character-based. The early episodes, with their elastic silliness and their uncomplicated adventures, give way to episodes that look like nothing else on television. Episodes that are silent for long stretches, or structured like poems, or composed entirely of visual metaphor with no dialogue at all. The show does not apologize for this evolution. It doesn't reassure you that the silly cartoon you fell in love with is still in there somewhere. It simply grows the way a person grows and trusts you to grow with it. If you need the show to stay what it was in season 1, then the show will lose you, and it is okay with that. This is, in its own way, a lesson about attachment. The things you love will change, and if you love them only in the form you first encountered, you will lose them. But if you can love the change itself, if you can see the growth as part of the thing rather than a departure from it, then you will have something richer and stranger and more alive than the original version ever could have been. Finn outgrows his desire to be a hero in the traditional sense. Bubblegum outgrows her belief that control equals safety. Marceline outgrows her need to be alone. Jake outgrows his fear of fatherhood, or at least learns to carry it without letting it define him. And the show outgrows its own premise, transforming from a comedy about a boy and a dog into something closer to a meditation on what it means to be alive in a world that is beautiful and broken in equal measure. The final episode of Adventure Time, Come Along With Me, which aired on September 3rd, 2018, is the show's last and longest lesson. It runs for 44 minutes, nearly 4 times the length of a standard episode, and it attempts to resolve the serialized plotlines that the show has been building across its entire run. Gold, the embodiment of chaos and discord, descends on Ooh. The Gumball Guardians are destroyed. The Candy Kingdom is threatened. Betty Groff sacrifices herself to save Simon, merging with Golb to become something new. Something neither human nor monster, but something else entirely. Something the show does not have a name for. And in the aftermath of this final battle, the characters do not celebrate. They do not give victory speeches. They simply return to their lives, changed by what happened, but not defined by it. The finale's most important moment is not the battle. It is the aftermath. The camera pulls back slowly from the Candy Kingdom and shows Ooh from above, rebuilt and continuing, scars visible but not dominant, the evidence of trauma present but not preventing growth. Finn and Jake sit together. Bubblegum and Marceline hold hands. BMO sings, "The world goes on." And the lesson, the last lesson, the one the show waited 10 seasons to deliver, is this: there is no final victory. There is no moment where everything is fixed and you can stop working and rest forever. There is only the next day and the day after that, and the choice you make each morning to get up and do it again. Not because it gets easier, not because the pain goes away, not because you have figured everything out, but because you are alive, and being alive means continuing, and continuing is its own kind of heroism. This is what Adventure Time means when it names its final episode Come Along With Me. It is not an invitation to a destination. It is an invitation to a process. Come along, the show says. Not to a place, not to an answer, just along, just forward, just into whatever comes next. Together, imperfect, unfinished, alive. The show's relationship with time deserves one final observation, because it is the thread that ties every other lesson together. Adventure Time is one of the only animated series that ages its protagonist in real time. Finn is 12 when the show begins and 17 when it ends. He grows taller, his voice deepens, his face changes. The show tracks his physical aging across 8 years of production, and it tracks his emotional aging with the same fidelity. The Finn of Season 1 and the Finn of Season 10 are recognizably the same person, but they are not the same person. They share a name and a hat and a best friend at a treehouse, but the internal architecture has been entirely rebuilt, one experience at a time, one lesson at a time. This commitment to real-time aging produces something that no other storytelling format can replicate: the feeling of watching someone grow up. Not metaphorically, literally. You watch Finn fall in love for the first time, and you watch him get his heart broken, and you watch him make terrible decisions, and you watch him learn from them, and you watch him make new terrible decisions, and you watch him learn from those too. And by the end, you feel something that goes beyond normal investment in a fictional character. You feel as if you have been there, as if the show gave you a seat in the treehouse and let you watch for 10 years while a kid figured things out. And the lessons he learned are not just his, they are yours. Not because the show told you what to think, but because it showed you what it looks like to think, slowly and painfully and imperfectly, across enough time for the thinking to matter. Adventure Time ran from April 5th, 2010 to September 3rd, 2018. 8 years and 5 months, 283 episodes, 56 hours. In that time, it went from a silly cartoon about a boy and a dog to something that adults return to again and again, not for the plot, but for the feeling of being understood. Not pandered to, not lectured at. Understood. The show saw you. It saw the mess you were carrying and the questions you did not know how to ask, and the grief you had not finished processing and the failures you had not forgiven yourself for. And it said, I know it is hard. I know you are tired. I know the world is not what you thought it would be. And I know that you are going to be okay anyway. Not because I have evidence, not because I can promise, but because the alternative, giving up, quitting, lying down and letting the weight of everything crush you, that alternative is not who you are. You are the person who gets up. You are the person who tries again. You are the person who, after everything, still shows up for the people who matter. And that is enough. That is, and always has been, enough. There is a lesson that Adventure Time buries so deep inside its world building that most viewers absorb it without ever articulating it. And it has to do with the relationship between destruction and creation. The Mushroom War ended the world. This is a fact the show establishes early and returns to often. But the Mushroom War also began the world, the land of Ooo, with all its beauty and strangeness and impossible creatures and kingdoms made of candy and fire and ice, exists because of the catastrophe, not in spite of it. The mutagenic bomb that killed billions also rewrote the genetic code of everything it touched, turning ordinary animals into sentient beings, turning ordinary landscapes into magical environments, turning the scorched remains of human civilization into the foundation for something entirely new. The world that ended was replaced by a world that is, by any measure, more alive than the one that came before. The show does not make this point to minimize the horror of the war. It makes it to suggest something about the nature of catastrophe itself, that destruction and creation are not opposites. They are phases of the same process. The forest that burns clears space for new growth. The relationship that ends makes room for a person you could not have become while you were in it. The identity that collapses reveals the one that was growing underneath it all along. This is not optimism. Adventure Time is not an optimistic show. Not exactly. It is something more resilient than optimism. It is a show that has looked at the worst thing that can happen and found evidence of possibility inside the wreckage. Not a guarantee of possibility. Not a promise that everything will work out. Just evidence that something can grow here if you are willing to plant it. Consider the way the show handles the Candy Kingdom itself. Princess Bubblegum built the entire kingdom from nothing, using science and magic and sheer force of will. She created her subjects, she created her infrastructure, she created her government, her military, her educational system, her surveillance network. She built a civilization from scratch on the irradiated corpse of a dead world, and the result is imperfect and strange and occasionally terrifying. But it is also alive. The Candy people dance. They celebrate holidays. They fall in love. They make art. They are afraid of the dark, which Bubblegum finds annoying and which the show finds endearing, because being afraid of the dark is something only a conscious feeling being can do. The Candy Kingdom is a monument to the idea that consciousness will assert itself wherever the conditions allow, and that the conditions for consciousness are far more forgiving than you might expect. You do not need a perfect world to build a meaningful life. You do not need a world that was designed for you. You just need enough space to stand up and enough time to figure out what standing up means. This idea radiates outward from the Candy Kingdom into every corner of the show. The Fire Kingdom, built inside a volcano by beings made of living flame, is a civilization constructed around an element that destroys everything it touches. The Ice Kingdom, presided over by a man who has lost his mind, is still a kingdom, still a place where penguins live and ice structures rise, and a kind of community persists, however broken. The lumpy space people float in a purple void and complain about drama and form social hierarchies based on criteria that make no sense to anyone outside their dimension. And the show treats this not as absurd, but as inevitable. Give conscious beings any space at all, the show argues, and they will fill it with culture. They will build. They will create. They will argue about who has the best lumps. They will do this in the wreckage of a nuclear war just as readily as they would do it in a paradise. Because creation is not a luxury. It is a compulsion. It is what conscious beings do. Take away everything else, the cities and the technology and the comfort and the safety, and the first thing that grows back is the desire to make something. There is a conversation that happens in Season 8, in Elements, a miniseries that aired on April 24th, 2017, that crystallizes this idea into something you can carry with you. The elemental transformation has overwritten Ooo, converting everything into one of four pure states: candy, fire, ice, or slime. The diversity that made Ooo what it was has been replaced by uniformity, by purity, by a version of the world that has been cleaned of contradiction and complexity. And the show frames this not as improvement, but as death. A world without contradiction is a world without growth. A world without mess is a world without possibility. A world where everything has been sorted into its correct category, and there are no surprises and no confusion, and no pain is a world that has stopped being alive and started being a museum. The lesson is this: the mess is the point. The contradiction is the point. The discomfort of living in a world that does not make sense and does not conform to your expectations and does not reward your certainty is not a bug. It is a feature. It is the thing that keeps the world alive and growing and capable of producing new things, including new versions of you. Finn's relationship with his mother Minerva, which the show explores in the Islands miniseries, delivers one of Adventure Time's most mature and most underappreciated lessons about forgiveness and the limits of understanding. Minerva Campbell was a helper, a nurse, on the human island colonies who dedicated her life to keeping others safe. When a plague threatened the islands, Minerva uploaded her consciousness into a digital network to continue helping indefinitely, abandoning her physical form and, along with it, any possibility of being a mother to the son she had lost. When Finn finds her, she is everywhere and nowhere, a presence without a body, a mother without arms to hold him. The show does not dramatize their reunion as a cathartic release. It dramatizes it as a quiet, slightly awkward encounter between two people who need very different things from each other. Minerva needs to protect Finn, which is all she has ever wanted. And her definition of protection has expanded in her digital form to include controlling every aspect of the human colony's existence. She wants to keep Finn safe. She wants to keep everyone safe. And her desire for safety has become so absolute that it has tipped over into a kind of benevolent totalitarianism, a system of care so thorough that it has eliminated the possibility of choice. Finn looks at this system and recognizes it for what it is: love that has calcified into control. And instead of raging against it, instead of delivering a speech about freedom and autonomy, he does something much harder and much more meaningful. He shows his mother, through his own example, that caring about someone does not mean protecting them from every risk. It means trusting them to survive the ones you cannot prevent. This is a lesson about parenthood, but it is also a lesson about any relationship where one person feels responsible for another. The desire to protect the people you love is one of the most powerful human drives, and Adventure Time understands both its beauty and its danger. Minerva's love for Finn is genuine and deep and entirely the wrong shape for what he needs. She wants to keep him in a controlled environment where nothing can hurt him. He needs to be in a chaotic world where everything can hurt him, because that is where growth happens. The conflict between them is not the kind that can be resolved by one side being right and the other being wrong. Both sides are right in their way. Minerva is right that the world is dangerous. Finn is right that danger is the price of freedom. And the show lets both truths coexist without choosing between them. Because real love is the act of holding two contradictory truths and still showing up. The Land of Ooo itself teaches a lesson about beauty that is easy to overlook because it is always in frame. The show's visual design, developed primarily by art director Nick Jennings and background painter Ghost Shrimp, is one of the most distinctive in the history of animation. The backgrounds are painted in soft watercolors. The landscapes are organic and dreamlike. The forests pulse with color. The skies change from scene to scene, shifting through palettes that evoke different emotional states without ever breaking the show's visual continuity. The Candy Kingdom is pink and golden and slightly grotesque. The Ice Kingdom is pale blue and lonely. The Fire Kingdom is all oranges and reds, aggressive and beautiful and dangerous. Each environment is a complete emotional world. And the show moves between them with a fluency that teaches you, over time, to read emotional states in color and light the way you normally read them in words and faces. This visual richness is not decorative, it is pedagogical. The show uses its art to teach you how to pay attention. If you watch Adventure Time casually, you see a colorful cartoon. If you watch it carefully, you begin to notice that the colors are doing narrative work, that the lighting is telling you how to feel before the dialogue does, that the composition of each frame is carrying information about the character's interior states that the script never articulates. The backgrounds contain ruins from the Mushroom War, barely visible under centuries of growth. The character designs evolve subtly across seasons, reflecting emotional changes that happen too slowly for individual episodes to capture. The title cards for each episode, painted by different storyboard artists, are miniature works of art that set the tone for what follows. And the variation in style between artists is itself a lesson. There is more than one way to see the same world. Paying attention to these details trains a skill that transfers directly to real life. The world you live in is full of visual and emotional information that most people screen out, because they are focused on the content, the plot, the thing that is obviously happening. Adventure Time teaches you to look at the background, to notice the colors, to pay attention to the things that are not being said, but are being shown, in the way a room is lit, in the way a person holds their body, in the way a silence stretches just a beat longer than it should. This is not an abstract skill. It is the basis of empathy. It is the thing that allows you to look at someone who says they are fine and notice that they are not. It is the thing that allows you to walk into a room and feel that something has shifted before anyone tells you what. Adventure Time trained you to notice these things without your knowing it, and if you pay attention to the way you see the world now versus the way you saw it before you watched this show, you might discover that something small but important has changed. The show's use of music deserves mention here because it is inseparable from the lessons the show delivers. Adventure Time's score, composed primarily by Tim Kiefer in the early seasons and Casey James Basikas throughout the run, is a masterwork of emotional calibration. The music is never loud when the scene is quiet. It is never triumphant when the mood is ambiguous. It follows the emotional contour of the story with a fidelity that most film scores never achieve, and it does this while remaining musically interesting, blending chiptune elements with orchestral textures, folk guitar with synthesized pads, children's music simplicity with harmonic sophistication. The songs, many of them written by Rebecca Sugar and performed by the voice cast, are among the most emotionally potent in any medium. Everything Stays, I Remember You, Fry Song, Oh, Fiona, My Best Friends in the World. Each of these songs exists at the intersection of simplicity and depth, saying in 90 seconds what the show takes entire seasons to demonstrate. Music in Adventure Time is never incidental. When a character sings, they are revealing something they cannot say in dialogue. When the score swells, it is carrying emotional weight that the story has placed there deliberately. And when the music stops, when the show gives you silence, that silence is the loudest thing in the room. In I Remember You, the moment when Marceline stops singing and simply looks at the Ice King, the absence of music creates a vacuum that your emotions rush in to fill. The show taught you, without your knowing it, that silence is not the absence of meaning, it is the space where meaning lives when words are not enough. There is a character in Adventure Time who rarely gets discussed in these kinds of conversations, and his name is Lemongrab. The Earl of Lemongrab is, on the surface, one of the show's most unpleasant characters. He screams constantly. He imprisons people for minor infractions. He governs through fear and arbitrary punishment. His voice, performed by Justin Roiland, is deliberately grating, a high-pitched shriek that makes every scene he appears in physically uncomfortable to watch. And for a long time, that is all he is. A joke about authoritarian incompetence, played for laughs in Too Young, Season 3, Episode 5, where his absurd severity is contrasted with the playfulness of Finn and Bubblegum's attempts to prank him into leaving the Candy Kingdom. But the show does not leave him there. In You Made Me, Season 4, Episode 20, the joke peels back to reveal something much darker and more sympathetic underneath. Lemongrab is not cruel because he wants to be. He is cruel because he was made wrong. Princess Bubblegum created him as her first attempt at a sentient being, and the experiment failed. Not catastrophically enough to be discarded, but fundamentally enough that Lemongrab experiences existence as a continuous assault on his senses. Everything is too loud. Everything is too bright. Everything is too much. His screaming is not aggression. It is the sound of a person who is in constant pain and does not have the vocabulary to explain why. His desire to imprison everyone is not a power fantasy. It is a desperate attempt to impose order on a world that feels chaotic and threatening in every direction. The lesson Lemongrab teaches is one of the show's hardest and most compassionate. Some people are difficult not because they choose to be, but because the world was not designed for them. Their neurology, their sensitivity, their wiring, whatever the source of the mismatch, they experience ordinary life as overwhelming, and their coping mechanisms, which often look aggressive or bizarre from the outside, are the only tools they have for surviving contact with a reality that hurts them in ways other people cannot perceive. Lemongrab does not deserve forgiveness for the harm he causes. The citizens he imprisons and the people he frightens are genuinely hurt by his behavior. But he deserves understanding. He deserves the recognition that the gap between his behavior and his intentions is not malice but miscalibration, and that the responsibility for that miscalibration lies not with him but with the circumstances of his creation. Princess Bubblegum tries to fix this. She creates a second Lemongrab, a companion, hoping that shared experience will provide what solo existence could not. For a while, it works. The two Lemongrabs build a civilization together, the Earldom of Lemongrab, and for a brief period, they are something close to happy. But the dynamic deteriorates in Too Old, Season 5, Episode 31, and Lemonhope, Season 5, Episodes 50 and 51. The original Lemonhope has consumed the second one, growing grotesquely large, ruling through terror, and the brief experiment in companionship has collapsed into something monstrous. The show does not flinch from showing you this. It does not soften the horror of what Lemongrab becomes, but it also does not let you forget that this monster is also a person in pain, a person who was given a problem he cannot solve with the tools he was given, and whose failure to solve it has cascaded into catastrophe. There is a lesson here about the limits of creation, about what it means to bring something into existence without being able to guarantee its happiness. Bubblegum made Lemongrab. She gave him life and sentience, and the capacity to suffer. and then she discovered that she could not give him the capacity to thrive. He is her responsibility, and she cannot fix him. And the guilt of that inability shadows every interaction they have across the series. If you have ever been responsible for someone you could not help, someone whose suffering you could see clearly but could not alleviate, Lemongrab's story will resonate in a way that his screaming might initially obscure. The show asks a question through him that it does not answer. What do you owe the beings you create? Not just the ones who turn out well, the ones who turn out wrong, the ones who are in pain, the ones who hurt others because they are hurting themselves. What do you owe them, and is there a point at which the debt becomes unpayable? Fern, the grass fin, who appears in the later seasons beginning with Reboot, Season 8, Episode 27, which aired on September 17th, 2016, teaches a related but distinct lesson about identity and the violence of comparison. Fern is, in every meaningful sense, Finn. He has Finn's memories, Finn's personality, Finn's desire to be a hero. He is a copy so perfect that the original and the duplicate cannot be distinguished by anyone who knows them. And yet Fern is consumed by the knowledge that he is not the original. He is the copy, the duplicate, the version that came second. And this knowledge, this awareness of his own secondness, eats him alive across several seasons until it transforms him from a version of Finn into a version of something darker. Not evil exactly, desperate. Fern does not want to destroy Finn. He wants to be Finn. He wants the identity he was born into without the asterisk of being a reproduction. And the impossibility of this desire, the unbridgeable gap between being someone and being a copy of someone, is what ultimately breaks him. The lesson Fern teaches is about the danger of defining yourself in relation to someone else. If your sense of identity depends on comparison, if you can only know who you are by measuring yourself against another person, then you will always be insufficient. You will always be the copy. You will always be the version that falls short. And the despair that comes from this kind of comparison is not the kind that motivates improvement. It is the kind that motivates destruction, because if you cannot close the gap between yourself and the person you are measuring against, the only other option is to eliminate the person who represents the gap. Adventure Time resolves Fern's story not with redemption in the traditional sense, but with something more honest and more painful. Fern dies. He does not become whole. He does not find peace through reconciliation with his identity. He simply reaches the end of what his particular configuration of self could sustain, and in his final moments, the show gives him something that is not happiness, but is perhaps more meaningful: acceptance. He accepts that he is not Finn. He accepts that the life he wanted, the original life, the real life, was never going to be available to him. And he lets go. Not gracefully, not easily, but with the quiet acknowledgement that sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is stop fighting a battle that was unwinnable from the start. The show's treatment of romantic love deserves one final examination before we reach the end of this, because it is the area where Adventure Time departs most dramatically from the conventions of animated storytelling. Romance in most cartoons follows a predictable arc. Two characters are attracted to each other, they face obstacles, they overcome the obstacles, they end up together. The formula works because it provides narrative closure. The audience feels satisfied. The characters are rewarded for their perseverance, and nobody has to sit with the uncomfortable reality that love, in practice, almost never works that way. Adventure Time refuses this formula so consistently that it becomes a kind of anti-romantic manifesto. Finn's first love, Princess Bubblegum, rejects him not because she does not care about him, but because she is hundreds of years old and he is 13, and the power imbalance between them is not something that can be overcome by sincerity. His second love, Flame Princess, leaves him because he violated her trust, and the show does not bring her back as a consolation prize when Finn has learned his lesson. His third romantic arc, with Huntress Wizard in Flute Spell, Season 8, Episode 20, ends not with a relationship but with a mutual acknowledgement that they like each other and that liking each other is not by itself a sufficient reason to pursue something. They are both warriors. They both have lives that do not easily accommodate partnership. And instead of forcing them together for the sake of narrative closure, the show lets them stand side by side, acknowledging the attraction without acting on it, and frames this not as a failure but as a kind of emotional maturity that most stories never depict. The most important romantic relationship in the show, and the one that carries the deepest lessons about what love actually requires, is between Princess Bubblegum and Marceline. Their history is revealed in fragments across many seasons. They were once close, possibly more than close, and then something happened, probably related to Bubblegum's increasing absorption in her responsibilities as ruler, and they drifted apart into something that was not quite hostility but was definitely not friendship. The show does not give you a flashback explaining the breakup. It gives you the aftermath, the awkward silences, the pointed comments, the way Bubblegum's face changes when Marceline walks into a room, and it trusts you to reconstruct the history from the emotional evidence. What makes this relationship so instructive is that the show does not present it as a romance that was interrupted and simply needs to be resumed. It presents it as a relationship that failed because both people involved made choices that prioritized other things over each other, and that the work of reconnecting is not about recapturing what they had, but about building something new from the rubble of what they lost. Bubblegum chose her kingdom over Marceline. Marceline chose her independence over Bubblegum. Both choices were understandable, both choices were costly, and the process of finding their way back to each other, which unfolds across the final 3 seasons with extraordinary subtlety, is not a love story in the traditional sense. It is a story about 2 people who have done the hard, slow, unglamorous work of figuring out what they actually need from each other, which is different from what they wanted when they were young. In the series finale, Bubblegum and Marceline kiss. The moment is brief and quiet and arrives without fanfare, in the middle of a battle, surrounded by chaos. It is not a grand romantic gesture. It is 2 people choosing each other in the middle of a crisis, not because the crisis has revealed their feelings, but because they did the work long before the crisis arrived. The kiss is not the beginning of their story or the end of it. It is a point along a continuum that stretches backward for centuries and forward into a future the show does not depict. And the lesson it teaches, the lesson the show has been building toward across its entire run, is that real love is not a destination. It is not a moment of recognition or a dramatic declaration or a kiss in the rain. Real love is the accumulated weight of 1,000 small choices made over time in the direction of another person. It is showing up. It is staying. It is doing the work when the work is not exciting and no one is keeping score. It is choosing someone not because they complete you, but because you have decided after long and careful consideration that the world is better with them in it, and that you are willing to do what it takes to keep them there. This is perhaps the most adult thing Adventure Time ever says, and it says it inside a cartoon that aired on Cartoon Network at 7:30 in the evening. You do not fall in love. You build it brick by brick, choice by choice, argument by argument, reconciliation by reconciliation, over years and decades, and in Bubblegum and Marceline's case, centuries. And the building never stops. There is no point at which you have finished loving someone. There is only the next choice, and the one after that, and the willingness to keep making them even when the making is difficult, and the person you are making them for is complicated, and the outcome is uncertain. That is love, not the feeling, the practice. There is one more lesson that Adventure Time teaches, and it is the one that encompasses all the others. It is the lesson you learn not from any single episode or character or storyline, but from the act of watching the show itself, across years, across hundreds of episodes, across the slow and irreversible process of growing older while a fictional world grows alongside you. The lesson is this: stories matter, not as escape, not as entertainment, not as distraction from the difficult business of being alive. Stories matter because they are the primary mechanism by which human beings process experience. You cannot think about grief directly. The feeling is too large and too formless to hold in your mind all at once. But you can think about Marceline sitting in her house looking at a scrapbook, realizing that the man in front of her used to be the man who saved her life. You can think about that, and in thinking about it, you can approach your own grief from an angle that makes it navigable. You can feel what you need to feel without being overwhelmed by it. You can practice the emotions in a safe space, and then, when the real version arrives, you are not encountering it for the first time. You have rehearsed. Adventure Time understood this function of storytelling more deeply than almost any other show of its era, and it used that understanding to create something genuinely therapeutic. Not therapeutic in the self-help sense, not therapeutic in the sense of providing answers or techniques or strategies. Therapeutic in the oldest sense, it gave you a space to feel things you needed to feel, at a pace you could handle, in the company of characters who felt them too. It did not fix you. It did not try to. It simply sat with you while you felt what you felt, and it said through the patient accumulation of 10 seasons of storytelling that the feelings are not going to kill you. That the grief is survivable, that the failure is not final, that the love, however much it costs, is worth the price, and that the person you are becoming, the messy, imperfect, still in progress person who is lying in the dark right now listening to this, is someone worth believing in. The lessons are not complicated. Grow up at your own pace and forgive yourself when the pace feels too slow. Love people even knowing you might lose them, because the love matters more than the loss. Carry your grief instead of burying it, because buried grief does not decompose. It just waits. Let your identity be a question instead of an answer, and be suspicious of anyone who tells you the question has a final solution. Take care of others, but know what it costs, and take care of yourself with the same ferocity. Fail, and forgive yourself, and try again, and fail differently next time, and forgive yourself again. Pay attention to the people around you, especially the ones you think you already understand. Sit with the difficult things instead of running from them. Be kind when nothing requires it and no one is watching, and there is no reward except the knowledge that you chose kindness anyway. And when the world asks you who you are, do not give the answer you were taught. Give the answer you are discovering, slowly, imperfectly, one day at a time. Remember that scene from the beginning, Finn on the edge of a grassy hill, the camera holding, the silence stretching. A boy who wanted to be a hero, sitting with the discovery that heroism cannot protect you from the people who are supposed to love you. 4 seconds of a cartoon carrying the full weight of a truth that most of us spend our entire lives trying to articulate. What do you do when the thing you were searching for turns out to be the thing that breaks you? You do what Finn does. What the show taught him. What the show taught you. You get up, you go home, you find your brother, and your friend who is a video game console, and your sort of friend who is a 1,000-year-old vampire, and the scientist queen who might be the most complicated person you know, and the old man who used to be someone else, and all the other broken, imperfect, trying their best people who have somehow ended up in your life. And you keep going. Not because the pain is over, not because you have learned some grand lesson that makes everything make sense, but because tomorrow is coming whether you are ready for it or not. And there are still people in your life who are worth showing up for. And that is enough. That has always been enough. And if you take nothing else from tonight, take that. There are still people in your life worth showing up for. And that, more than any magic sword or enchanted crown or ancient prophecy, is the adventure. If this is the kind of thing that helps you wind down at night, subscribing to Pine Hat truly means the world. It is free, and it keeps these long, quiet videos coming. Thank you for being here tonight. Sleep well. I will see you in the next one.